Oh, hey, here we are. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hey.
It's good to see you. Hey, everyone. Thank you for being here today. We chose to make an adjustment to the schedule today just for our own sanity's sake. Today will be a 1-hour webcast. And thank you for being here for the pre-show banter. When did you finish the slides?
What about the slides?
When did you finish them?
I'll have them done before the end of class.
Oh boy.
I think I got them done yesterday.
So, Chris, I need to hear more of the story how the lightning struck near your house there.
Yeah, so 2 nights ago, had a lightning strike that I'm guessing was less than 100 feet from the house, maybe more like 30.
Wow.
Yeah, it was loud. It was when you hear the sound before you see the flash. Yeah, it's close. But that hit out back. It was really funny. It did knock out the power to the whole house. It did take some of the lights out, and it took out a GFI outlet. But of course, it also took out the internet.
Man.
So I am waiting on getting a new modem shipped to me, which is supposed to be today. Oh, wait, Chris, how are you online? I'm online because Shelby was nice enough to let me steal a corner where she's staying, so that's why the background looks a little different. Although Shelby was awesome.
Panda.
Yeah, Shelby was awesome and made sure I had the panda because, we've got to have the panda. That's just like a thing now, so.
So now you're like Bill Stearns and you're just sucking bandwidth over there, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Now, did it cook one of your UPSs?
No, it didn't cook a UPS.
Okay.
It did cook a GFI outlet, though.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that the strike was close to, so all of the outdoor outlets run off of one GFI outlet, which is just kind of how they do things. Well, that is the right way to do it, actually. But my guess is the lightning strike was close enough to one of the outlets to induce electricity into that circuit. I'm lucky the GFI outlet was there in that circuit and it blew up. And it literally blew up when I took a look at it and actually replaced it. It was pretty singed. But I'm guessing that had that GFI not blown, it probably would have gone into the circuit breaker box and gone through the rest of the house that way. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man.
Part of the fun of living in Florida.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff, Yeah, and I was wondering because Monday your hair was straight. So I was wondering,
Yeah, exactly. Now, so if you look at young pictures of me, if you look at pictures when I was like 3 or 4 years old, I did have very straight hair. And from what my mother tells me, I had this issue after that where I had to go around the house sticking my tongue in electrical sockets. I do remember doing it. I do remember thinking it was a lot of fun. I thought the tingle was good. So my parents went through hell putting the little like baby-proof things in and then taping it to the wall, and I just pulled the tape off. And then shortly after that, I started getting curly hair. So go figure.
Wow. And look at you now. You're a mad scientist. So it worked out.
Exactly. So as long as Shelby doesn't go around sticking her tongue in electrical sockets, she'll have that straight hair for life.
Yeah.
Well, this is a hell of a conversation to join.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience in this?
I don't.
Any experience sticking your tongue in electrical sockets?
I
Yeah.
kind of want to, though, now. I mean, it sounds like a fun time, to be honest.
Right. Hey, Marcelo, glad to see you here, man.
Yeah, same. Likewise.
Like what we were just talking about, like when I was younger or whatever, I used to love the 9-volt batteries, stick them on your tongue. But that's nothing like what you were saying with 110. I mean,
Yeah, you got to get on his level, man. I mean, come on. Like, what batteries are nothing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you only like
The worst I ever got hit with was 240 volts. I was in a manufacturing environment. I was up on the 3rd floor of a scaffold. We were working on some lights while they were live. And it was literally like the last light I was working on. And I was just about done and just like lost my focus at the last minute. Got a good shock off of that. Somehow made it down the 3 stories of the scaffold, got to the ground, and I'm like, oh, thank God I'm still alive. And one of my coworkers walked up to me and said, "Oh, dude, that was an awesome sound you made. Can you do that again?" And I just hauled off and hit him in the face. Luckily, my boss had been hit with electricity before. And when he heard about the episode, he said, "Yeah, you do weird things when you got hit with electricity. Don't worry about it." So I didn't get written up for it or anything else. And I think a lot of that had to do with he didn't like that guy either. So.
Wow, man.
So the funny one was I had a guy I worked with who was dating a girl. And if you know what a mizpah is, so a mizpah is a heart that's been broken in half, and you wear one half and your significant other wears the other half. Oh, isn't that cute? And he got hit with 480 from one hand through to the other, so it ran right across his chest. While he was wearing this mizpah, it actually melted his skin so that the metal burrowed into the skin. They had to cut it out of him. And it was probably about 2 months later she broke up with him.
Oh, man.
I wonder why.
So like tattoos of significant others in your past is bad enough. But when you've got one etched into your skin and it's like very prominent and noticeable, oh, that's going to be a bummer.
Eek. That's a cool story.
Yeah. Although sometimes, well, so it all depends. Sorry, what's that?
Oh, hey, there we go.
Yes.
Man, you're psychic. You knew that was coming.
Yeah. But see, really, it all comes down to how well you play the scars. So go way back in my past, and I used to do a lot of fencing. And I had a buddy named Bernie that I used to do fencing with. And we decided at this one party we were going to pretend to get in a sword fight with each other. So we orchestrated this whole thing out, and we were sitting around. There was probably like, I don't know, 30, 40 people. And we're playing quarters. And I obviously cheated. You know, I pretended you're supposed to bounce the quarter into the glass. I tapped it off the table and dropped it in the glass. And he called me on cheating, and I called him a liar, and we acted like we got in this big fight, grabbed a couple of swords from above the fireplace, jumped out on the back porch and out into the backyard before anybody could do anything about it. And before anybody could come out and try and stop us, we're out there, you know, acting like we're trying to kill each other with a couple of swords. So, so we're going at it. A couple of people tried to get in, and yeah, they didn't dare. And there was this one part of it where like we were supposed to like cross swords and kind of get right in each other's face and kind of and act like we're pissed at each other. And we got to that point in the whole thing. We looked each other in the eye and we just burst into laughter. Just couldn't help it. So we dropped the swords and just laughing our asses off. Haha, we got everybody. And it didn't register until later, but I heard one of my friends say to the other, "Hey, Sean, pick up the sword and I'll teach you how to sword fight." And what was this kid's name? It was Phil. And, you know, I heard Phil's voice, didn't think about it. It didn't really register right away. And then all of a sudden it did register. And I'm like, wait a minute, I know this guy. He does not know how to sword fight. And Sean, I've actually taught a couple of things to. So, oh, crap. And I turned around just in time to see Phil say, "Hey, you know, take a swing at me." And I see Sean with the sword come at him on one side and it gets blocked. He comes at it on the other side and gets blocked. He comes around like he's going to hit him on the other side again, but slips back and then comes straight down the middle of the guy's head. And he wasn't ready for that. So I just see this sword come down. So I'm standing behind the guy who just got hit. I see the sword come down. I see blood splurt in the air. And I see him falling back. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is really going to put a bummer on the party. Now we're going to go bury this guy out in the swamp. So luckily, it was not a mortal wound. He just got this big cut down the front of his forehead. But of course, they had to bring him into the hospital that way. So, so they bring him in the hospital, and this nurse came in, and she's like, "So what happened to you?" And he's like, "Sword fight." And she's like, "What? A sword fight? What?" And he's like, "Yeah, I was defending this girl's honor because this guy was picking on her, and you know, and I got wounded, and he ended up going home with her that night." So, you know, when it comes to like weird scars, it all depends on how you play it.
Yeah,
Are we live right now?
wow.
Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, heck
Oh,
yeah.
okay. This is
Yeah, for
fantastic.
quite some time, Marcel. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Yeah, because I couldn't see the start broadcast button, so I was like, wait, we're live.
Thanks for not saying all that normal stuff that you say where it gets in trouble. Oh.
Yeah, I could just imagine that dude going to the hospital and they ask what happened, and he's like, I was at medieval times eating my chicken. I don't know what happened.
I like this one. I watched my dad weld his wrench to the car battery and frame, and his wedding ring to the wrench. That was a fun day. Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, not for him.
See, this is why we need a podcast, Jason, because like we need to talk about like
Yeah.
I want to know more about this, but
Yeah. So what happened was the other day, someone's like, "Hey, I saw you on like I listened to your podcast on Spotify," and I was like, "We have a what?"
podcast.
And I looked and I was like, "I'll be darned. We
was
have
it
a
any-
podcast." on
Was it any good?
There's like this one employee at Black Hills who has done a podcast all this time without telling anybody.
So now that we have a massive following on podcast at Black Hills, I guess we're gonna start doing podcasts in 2021.
But the thing is, I want this podcast to not talk about security stuff and just like talk about these stories. That's what
Yes.
I want. Just like all this.
I think we could easily do an entire season just off of John Strand's stories.
Yeah, he's got some good ones. That's for sure.
Yeah,
Actually, it would be fun to do a whole series on the backstories about sands that you've never heard of before.
I think Sands would be like, "What's that now?"
Yeah.
I'm spelling a cease and desist order coming our way.
Yeah.
My favorite were always the ones that would socially engineer the front desk to get your room number, show up at your room at 2 a.m., and thought you would be happy that they showed up at your room at 2 a.m.
Hell no. Hell no. And this is why I don't do sands anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, Journeyman 117. I'm pretty sure we're gonna call our podcast PreShow Banter. Like that's gonna be the
That should be a thing. That's actually a good idea. I like this.
PSB, the old PSB. Hopefully that PSB doesn't stand for anything. Now I have to go to Urban Dictionary. All right. And
Oh my God, I can't believe you just said that on the air, Jason. How's everybody doing? Hope you're having fun. Again, apologize for the confusion about how long this webcast would be. It was originally thought, hey, yeah, we can do a 4-hour on this. And then it was, well, we could add this content. Oh, wait, that's in this class. We could add this content. Oh, wait, that's in this other class. What about this content? Oh, hey, that's in this class that's coming. So we wanted to carve out something new, something unique that isn't showing up in the other webcasts that we're doing. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Is we've talked a lot in like the 4-hour threat hunting class, the last RITA class we did. We've talked a lot about like how to process data, how to threat hunt with it, how to use the tool, and we never actually got into, hey, here's how to actually get it installed on your system so that you can use it. So that is going to be the theme today. We're going to go through and we're going to take a brand new, clean 1.2 system, and we're going to get RITA up and running, and you'll see it's actually pretty easy. So thanks to our sponsors. This is being primary Active Countermeasures, but, Black Hills, Wild West, Hack and Fest, we're all family with each other. So, sponsored by all, much appreciated. So for those who haven't been to any of the earlier webcasts to know what RITA is short for Real Intelligence Threat Analytics. It's also the first name of John Strand's wife. Aw, isn't that cool? But it's a network-based threat hunting tool. So what this tool is for is if you have millions of connections going in and out of your internet link each day, this will go through and sift through those to identify the ones that are most likely command and control traffic. Specifically, if you've got an internal system that's been compromised and some third party is controlling that system, RITA helps you go in and find that activity, because that's probably something you don't want to leave running on your network if you can help it. It looks for the primary indicators of C2. So beacons, long connections. It does a deep dive into C2 over DNS. We also have a number of threat intel feeds that we pull into the tool. You can always add your own if you'd like. And it uses the same back end that our commercial product does. This was important to us. So we went through and we patented, I think it was like 24 or 28 different ways to go about finding C2. And the reason we patented it was so that we could then turn around and put it into an open source product and make it available to everybody. We figured out this was good enough at finding C2. We didn't want some company, even us, to hoard it. So that's why we created the patents. That's why we included this in RITA. So the big difference between RITA, the open source product that anybody can download for free, and AI Hunter, the commercial product, is really the graphic user interface and the simplicity. Beyond that, its ability to detect things is the same in both tools. So system requirements. This runs on Linux. Sorry, Windows people, but it's designed to run on Linux. The requirements are actually pretty minimal. You can see I've got 2 cores here, 8 gigabits of RAM, but quite honestly, a lot of that really is just to kind of handle Zeek. So the thought process is you set up a span port, mirror port, copy port, call it whatever you want to on your switch. You monitor all the traffic going in and out of the internal interface of your firewall. You have Zeek go through, collect the data from all those sessions going in and out of the internal interface of your firewall. Zeek writes it out into some log files. RITA imports that data. RITA goes through that data to see if it can identify any C2 traffic. So typically, you can get away with running Zeek and RITA on the same system, no problem. If you've got a large environment, let's say we've got 20 connections to the internet, you could have 20 Zeek probes out there all feeding data back to a single RITA instance and have RITA process the data from all of them. Then it kind of comes down to an architecture thing. What makes the most sense for you. You may want to run, one instance out in the cloud, one instance on-prem. It really depends on what it is you're actually looking for. So where to get RITA? You can go to our the Active Countermeasures website. You can go to our free tools, go to RITA, and all the information on it is right there. But I also wanted to give you the GitHub repository because that's where the actual code is located. So if you go up to that link, that'll go in and that'll tell you all about RITA. And really what I wanted to do with this class was I wanted to kind of make it hands-on. Rather than going through and just showing a bunch of slides, let me go through and do it live so you can kind of see what the experience is because, hey, sometimes these webcasts go too smoothly. I had to do something to make sure that a monkey wrench gets thrown in and we have even more problems with it. So I'm actually going to run through this live. Now, I did include slides. So you can go to the ACM webcast content Discord channel, or there's a link within GoToMeeting. You can just click that link to grab a copy of the slides. And what you're going to get is a copy of all the commands I'm going to be using as I go through this stuff. Starting with this one here, which is how do you actually get it installed? The way to get it installed is to start with this download script. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to copy that. And then I have a SSH session here running to a system that we can see is up and running. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to paste in that command. Once I do, this goes out, grabs that install script, downloads it. It's only 23K. So as you can see, it downloads it pretty quickly. But that install script is going to do everything for me. So I need to go through and make it executable. So that's the first thing I'm going to go through and do. And now I'm actually going to go through and run it. And I have to actually run it as root because we're going to be doing some root type stuff with this. So sudo space // install.sh. And again, all these commands are in the slides if you download them, if you miss something. This is not in there, which is my password. Oh, I got it right on the first time. Yay. And then the install script will start running. Slides are actually in the ACM webcast content Discord channel. There's also a link in the chat session of the GoToMeeting session. So you can see the first thing the install script does is it goes and it looks for any dependencies it has, like curl, core utilities, and anything that isn't there, it just goes ahead and installs it. It also will go in and install all the code needed for RITA. It will also, unless you override this on the command line, install Zeek for you and install MongoDB. So Zeek is used to watch the traffic and collect all that data for RITA to process, and then RITA stores that information into a Mongo database. Now, you may have a Mongo cluster you want to use instead, and that's fine. You can go in and you can run the install with a set of command line switches to say, don't install Mongo. If you already have Zeek up and running, you can say, don't install Zeek. It's already there. So you can override those two dependencies if you want to. But if you're starting with a clean system, just let the install script do everything for you. So now it's saying, hey, I'm going to go in and I'm going to create the Zeek configuration file for you, unless you really want to go through and do it manually. Unless you're better than us at optimizing Zeek for performance, I would say just let the install script go through and do it. The next thing it'll go through and figure out is what network interface should it use. So if there's multiple, it might give you multiple choices to choose from. If there's only one, like we have here, it's just going to grab that one and tell you, hey, now I'm going to go through and use this. If you're installing this as a VM on your local system, it may come back and tell you, hey, you have no usable interfaces. I can't create a node.config file. And what's going on there is you're running on a VM, and it knows it can't sniff traffic off of a VM connection. So there's no reason to go in and create a node config file. So if you get that, probably because you're running on a VM on the local system. So then it pops up and it shows me, yep, this is what I'm going to go through and config. Would you like to replace the existing node config file, which is the default that comes with the tool, with the file above? Sure, go ahead and do it. And bang, that was it. So I ran the install script. I've answered yes, I think 3 times so far. And the install script goes through and does everything else for me. So it's now got Zeek up and running. Now, one caveat with this. Once you run the install script, it's going to put Zeek in my path, but that will not take effect until the next time I log in. Once this finishes, if I try to run the Zeek command, you'll see it says, yeah, I know nothing about Zeek. So I'm going to have to kill that session, start it back up again. And this is where things are probably going to go wrong, right? How much you want to bet I can't get back into that system again? No, looks like maybe I can. Hey. So there's the install script I downloaded. Here's a temp file that it created as part of doing the install. And now if I do a Zeek, there's my Zeek setup. So it's in my path. Everything is all ready to go from here. So I've got RITA on here. I've got Zeek on here. I've got MongoDB. Everything is set up the way I need it in order to be able to get some work done. So I got a couple of directories I set up, Lab 1 and Lab 2. So we're going to go into Lab 1 first. And you can see what I have here is a ton of Zeek log files that were already created. So if I have Zeek collecting information, it's going to be creating these types of log files. So there's a number of different logs. There's con, which goes through and gives me connection information on every connection it sees. Con summary, that goes through and tries to do some summarization for me, like, hey, here are the 10 connections that transfer the most amount of data, stuff like that. DNS traffic, HTTP, SSL, X509, etc. But you can see this con summary file went from 0 to 1, and then from 1 to 2, 2 to 3. These are actually hours of the day. So I'll get 24 of these, as you can see all the way down here. So every hour, Zeek is writing out a log file. Now, one of the things you can do is you can create a rolling data set within RITA to go through and add these in as they come. And it allows, what the running data set allows you to do is to continue to append. When you create a data set within RITA, and I'm going to do that in just a minute, if you try to re-import that same data back into the data set again, we'll see you're trying to import the same data and say, hey, you already did this. That way you don't end up with duplicate records. A rolling data set allows you to add data to an existing database so that if you're appending in the course of the day, that way you can always be working with the latest and greatest information. But we're going to go through and we're going to do a straight import here. So if I type in RITA, here's all my RITA commands. So this is my help file showing me all my RITA commands. So I know that that's working just fine. RITA was installed properly as well. I can also do a RITA test config. I'm going to pump that through less. And what this does is this looks at the RITA configuration file to show me how is this set up. That allows me to review the setup on the whole thing. So for example, it's showing me that it's going to talk to Mongo on the local host at this port here. It's also telling me that it's not using TLS and it's not using digital certificates. Well, wait a minute, Chris, isn't it a good idea to encrypt everything? Well, we're talking to Mongo on the local host interface. So the only person who could sniff this traffic is someone who already has root on this box. And guess what? If they already have root on this box, they already have access to all that data anyway. So when we talk to localhost, we don't encrypt it. If this was going to be a remote system, yeah, then we may want to turn TLS on. How often do you roll it? 24 hours a day. Where do you want to save log files? We'll look at that in a little bit. Varlog, RITA logs. Blacklisting, has that been enabled? Is beaconing enabled? So all the different modules, this is where you can go in and you can turn stuff on and turn stuff off. Never include is a list of stuff that if you see it, don't include it, meaning that it's probably illegitimate data, like anything coming from or going to the loopback address shouldn't be seen on the network. It's a misconfiguration or it's somebody doing some sort of an attack or whatever. All broadcast network, you get the idea. And one of the things you want to make sure is properly configured is what are your internal subnets? So we assume anything with a private address is an internal network. That fits for 85% of the networks out there. But you may have, you might be .edu and have legal addresses internally. You may need to go in and change that internal subnets definition to be your actual internal address space. So you can go in, you can kind of tweak that any way that you need to. Let's see, that's probably about it for the really interesting stuff. So our config file looks good, Mongo's installed, Zeek's installed, everything's there. So next, hey, what's up, Marcello?
It helps if I turn off mute. You can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I got 3 questions for you before you go on.
Go for it.
First off, what SSH client are you using? It's Smart TTY, right?
That's correct.
Okay, so that's 1. And 2 is, why are you using Ubuntu 16? Does it support newer versions of Ubuntu as well?
It does. I'm lazy. So I have a default Ubuntu image that has my public key on it. It's patched and up to date. It's all configured the way I want it to. So I will admit I got lazy yesterday and just cloned the default image I used. Yeah, you can use 18 on here and you'll be fine.
Perfect.
I don't know if we've tested with 20 yet or not.
Okay, perfect. That actually answers another question. And one person says he or she works on a VM directly. What should I do to make it recognize Zeek?
To make it recognize Zeek.
Or I think they meant the interface, like the interface to sniff traffic.
Okay. So you can go in. So you'll have to go into Zeek and manually configure it for that interface. What we're looking for is an interface you can run in promiscuous mode, which multi-Ethernet interfaces you can run them in promiscuous mode, no problem. The issue you have with a VM is that it's a virtual interface. It can't run in promiscuous mode. So we're seeing that and saying, well, there's no interface that could actually look at traffic going to and from other systems. Therefore, we can't go in and configure it. If you go through Zeek's install process, it'll tell you how to go into the node config and actually define what interface that you want to use. And you'd have to go through and do the definition that way. But even then, all you're going to see is traffic going to and from that VM.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's not advisable to use this from a VM then. Okay.
Correct.
Alrighty, and I think that's it for now. So carry on.
Cool. Just to review, we've got some Zeek logs here. We've got RITA and everything installed. So now what we want to do is pull in those Zeek logs. We want to import them. And so I'm going to say RITA space import. That tells it I want to import some data. I got to tell it where that data is located. So there's my definition for that. And then I have to give it a database name. This will be the name of the database that I use to go in and define things later. If I was doing this as a script, let's say I was running this as a cron job to import all my data once a night, I'd want to go in and use some variables here to maybe give each database name a date timestamp that helps me identify when was this data actually collected. In this case here, yeah, I'm not too worried about that. So you can see it went through. So what's all this stuff up here? It just spewed a lot up on the screen. The first thing it does is it tells me, hey, I saw all these Zeek logs, and I'm not actually going to parse anything out of those. We don't use anything out of like the weird.log file. It'll also tell me what log files is it actually going to go in and import. You can see then it goes through, tells me what it's parsing through, what it pulled in. Here's the analysis taking place. Bang, it's done. So now if I say read a list, this will show me what databases I have loaded, and the only one I have loaded is this one I just pulled in. The other thing I can do is I can take a look at var log, I think it's RITA, right? No. Where's varlib RITA? That's where we want to go. Spelling matters. Okay, and you can see I have one log that's been created so far with today's date stamp on it. I'll get more of them as the days go by. But what this allows me to do is I can look at anytime I go in and run a RITA command that actually processes information. So running the test config won't show up here. Just running RITA to look at the help won't show up here. But if I run something else like the import, that will show up here. And this is just giving me, here's my timestamp when it was running the command import. Here are the different arguments that were passed. So this is giving me a full summary of everything that it just went through and did. Now notice we get some errors here. The log contains a field with no candidate in the data structure. Error. Unmatched field in the log, missing field equals JA3 yes. What does that mean? What that means is the version of Zeek that I have installed does not have the JA3 plugin. Or actually, the other possibility, and the one that's more likely in this case, is that the log files that were created was created with a version of Zeek that did not have the JA3 module installed. Let me back up a little bit here. So what is JA3? What's this whole thing talking about? JA3 is a hash of the TLS negotiation. So imagine I am a Windows 10 system running the latest version of Chrome. I'm going to try and negotiate my TLS sessions a certain way. So I might say, I prefer to use AES 512-bit, but I'll back off to AES 256 if I have to. Yeah, I'll do some sort of negotiation. What Zeek can do with the JA3 plugin is hash that negotiation, create an MD5 sum of it, or a SHA-1 or a SHA-512. And now that becomes a unique identifier for that. And the thought process is if we're all running Windows 10 and we're all running the latest, greatest version of Chrome, all of our hashes will look the same. So if you have consistency with your desktop environment, they should all generate the same hash. What you're looking for is outliers. Let's say I'm running a client that prefers to use AES 256, but it will use AES 512 if it's forced to. Well, that's using the same two algorithms I talked about before, just in a different order. Because we're actually keeping track of the hash, not what algorithms were supported, that hash will be different. I'll see that negotiation is different. So if I know I have a standard that all the desktops are supposed to be following, and I've got 1,000 systems and 998 of them all look the same and 2 look different, it might be worth taking a look at the 2 that look different. So that's what the JA3 hash does for us. So we're actually importing that data in when it's available. Now the Zeek files that I just used was created with a version of Zeek that did not have the additional JA3 module enabled, which means it never wrote out a hash for any of those TLS sessions. So what this error message is telling me is that I wanted to import this field. It wasn't available in the data, therefore I'm skipping it. This is a soft error that the import still took place. It still pulled the data in. It's still going to do what it can with it, but that field information is going to be missing. It won't be available for review later. So I get a lot of that. I can see my import stuff here taking place. Probably not the best formatting, but you get the idea. It's telling me, yep, went through, I finished parsing all the files. So if you're ever having problems getting RITA working, or if you're worrying, or if you're got a problem and you're saying, hey, is it a Zeek issue or is it a RITA issue? And you want to see what happened with the import process, this is the place to go look for that. Finished importing, and now it's pulling more log files, and you get the idea. So now that this was imported, here's my data list. So I've got lab 1. So now I can do something like a RITA, show beacons, lab 1, and I'm just going to pump that through head. So we look for the first 10 entries. And hey, there's my analysis for beacons. I could go in and do the same thing for like long connections. Oh, yeah, that helps. Specify a database. There we go. This is my top 10 longest connections that took place. See, and now we're starting to get back into the analysis process, which we covered as part of both the free 4-hour threat hunting class and the advanced 2-day threat hunting class. So, what do you do with this data once you get here? Go to one of those 2 classes to be able to get that type of information. I want to keep this just kind of focused on how to get this all set up and how to get this running. But you get the idea. So when I have data coming in from Zeek, this is the format it's going to look like. That's how to go through and get this done. I can go through and, like I said, I can go through and I can write a cron job to have this import take place for me automatically. I can use some variables to go in and assign date timestamps to the database names as I need to. It'll take a little bit of scripting to automate this, but it's not that bad to go through and do. Now, what if I don't have Zeek logs yet? So here I have a Pcap named fiesta_24hour.pcap that I want to go through and do a reader analysis on. Let's just take a look at it real quick. Hey, what's up, dude?
Hello again. I'm just gonna ask you really a couple of questions here that seem to be on everyone's mind. First off, have you guys tried RITA with the new Security Onion beta yet?
We have not to the best of my knowledge, no.
Okay. And
Although, quite honestly, it's using Zeek. It's using the JSON format of the log files. We read that. There's no reason why RITA should not work with the latest version of Security Onion.
That's awesome. And are there any tips for integrating RITA with Splunk, and have you tried that?
Have not tried that. So one of the things you could do is, let me just get this command out of the way here. Actually, I don't even have to do that. So I was going through showing, like, here's my long connections. I could go through and just pipe this output through Logger, send it off to Splunk that way. That might be relatively simple to go through and do. So there are options for getting this imported into like a syslog-based system like Splunk, but nothing that we've actually gone in and optimized.
Gotcha. And I think a lot of people have a lot of questions on the requirement for having this on like an actual machine instead of a VM. But there was one person who asked, would a spam port on a switch connected to a VM interface work on RITA? And then there was another person who asked about the promiscuous setting in VMware. Would that work with it?
So it depends what you're trying to accomplish here. If what you're trying to accomplish is monitoring all traffic going to and from that VM, then yeah, you might want to see about getting Zeek working and playing with the no config file and all the stuff that I mentioned. However, if you have RITA running on a VM, more than likely you're collecting that data someplace else. Like you might set up a box that will watch all the traffic leaving your entire infrastructure as a service environment, not just what's going to and from this one VM, and run Zeek on that, have it generate the log files, and then you could just do a quick secure copy with public-private keys over to the VM running RITA and go ahead and just import it in that way. So the issue with needing promiscuous mode and all of that, that's a Zeek thing. It's not a requirement as part of RITA.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. Go forth and continue.
No problem. All right. So we talked about how to deal with raw log files. Let's go in and take a look at this Pcap file. Yeah, that looks like a Pcap file. But you get the idea. I've got some bridge ID traffic taking place here. I've got some TCP traffic going by. So I've got a bunch of data in here. You know, it looks like some of it's going to TCP port 80. I see some multicast traffic in here. I see some IPv6 traffic. We're seeing some IGMP traffic taking place. So there's a ton of data in here. That's an interesting HTTP GET request, is it not? This one right here? That looks interesting to me. So that may be something to go back and pay attention to later. But you get the idea. There's a lot of traffic in here, and I want to go in and I want to do an analysis of that. So I'd love to be able to analyze this with RITA, but I have a Pcap, I don't have Zeek logs. So what do? Well, the first thing I need to do is take this Pcap and convert it to Zeek log format. And the way I do that is by running Zeek. So I'm going to say Zeek capital C. Capital C says do not do a CRC check at the application layer. One of the things, or excuse me, at layer 2, at the frame layer. One of the things I found is that sometimes when you're capturing traffic, especially if you're using like a virtual interface, the CRC check is being done by the network interface itself, and then it's being zeroed out. And then Zeek goes and tries to check that CRC, but the CRC's already been cleared, which means that it's going to look like it's not valid, which means it's going to say, hey, this is a bad frame, so I'm not going to bother processing any of the data in this. So you might try to read a Pcap file into Zeek, and it just pops up and spews across the screen, bad CRC, bad CRC, bad CRC. The way to avoid that is this -C command. So this is telling Zeek, do not do a CRC check on layer 2. Assume it's okay, ignore it, don't worry about it. The next switch I'm using is -R. That just says read this file, and I'm just going to read in this Pcap file. Zeek's going to go off, do its thing. It'll take a minute or two to run. And then once it's done, you'll notice I've got a bunch of log files in here now. So if I go in and look at like the con log, so I'm saying less -C, try and keep column format, con.log. Here's my con log file. Then it still looks messy, but you get the idea. So here's my con log out of Zeek with all summary of all my connections taking place. I can see my IDs for certain connections. I can see I've got some HTTP in here. I've got some DNS taking place here. Some 553 source port destination DNS. So that looks okay. So now I've got those log files, and now I want to take those log files and pull that into RITA. Well, I do that same RITA import. So RITA import, tell it where the files are located. And if I wanted, so notice I'm using star. That means all the files that are in this directory, RITA, I want you to try and process. Well, one of those files is the Pcap file. But RITA is smart enough to look at that and say, hey, that's not a Zeek log file I recognize. I'm going to ignore it as part of my processing. It might take an extra couple of milliseconds to figure that out. If I'm worried about the couple of milliseconds, I could say star.log and ignore it, but I'm just going to be lazy and leave it the way it is. And then I'm going to say I'm going to pump all of that into another data set called lab2. So this one was a little bit of a cleaner import. So you can see it went in, it imported all of these files. Notice it ignores anything that it doesn't understand, or it's trying to, well, so here it's saying, yeah, I'm going to try and import that. I see it exists. Notice the next thing it did, verify log files have not been previously parsed into the target data set. By default, RITA will not let you append an existing data set. You need to use the -- rolling switch in order to get that to work. But for most of us, we're going to go through, collect 24 hours worth of data. We'll run RITA once a day to process that prior 24 hours. And then we're going to go through and review those results after that. The rolling is only good if like your only job is to watch what's going on for potential C2 traffic, and you have the bandwidth to be able to sit on this thing all the time. Most of us don't, so this is the easiest way to go through and do that. So now when I do a RITA list, I've got lab 2 in there too. So I'm going to say RITA show beacons in lab 2. And there's everything that looks like a potential beacon taking place in here. So you get the idea. We've got some, we've got the ability to go in and pull in data from both a Pcap format or from a Zeek format. And if it's in Pcap format, we need to first convert it to Zeek format. And then we can pull it in from there, and now we're ready to go in and start a threat hunt, which again, how do we go through that in threat hunt? How do I figure out which of this stuff is bad and which stuff I need to pay attention to. Start with our free 4-hour course on threat hunting. And if you want to take it a step beyond that, we have a inexpensive, I think it's like $400 or $500, 2-day class on advanced threat hunting. That jumps into the stuff even deeper. But short answer for now is anything with a score of 0.8 or higher, those are usually the ones I want to go in and take a look at. And that would be these first two here. So I would go in and start running down these 2 IP addresses. Looks like we got .51 talking to 2 external IPs. I'd start running these down. Second one looks like a Microsoft address to me, so I think that might be a false positive, but I'd have to check into it deeper to find out. But I'd start my threat hunt on those first. And that's basically it in a nutshell. I thought it would take longer to go through and do this than this. We're actually doing really good on time. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to add something in that I had not planned on adding in. So one of the things that people run into for a problem is, how do I whitelist things? Gone through and I've identified things that are not evil, and I want to make sure that I don't have to go through and review them over and over again. How do I do that? Or is there a way to go in and do whitelisting with RITA? And the answer is not that's built into it, but there is a way to kind of hack it.
We got a few questions here. First off, people are asking for the link to the 4-hour free course that you mentioned. I'm not sure. I'm assuming that's on the Active Countermeasures YouTube channel, right?
It's actually not. It's something we keep password protected. Hey, Shelby, let's share that off. We'll share that off with this group.
Awesome. Okay, so I guess for the people in Discord asking for that, they're gonna post that on Discord soonish.
I'll share a link to the class page that has the recording along with all the lab info on it.
Perfect.
Awesome. I'm actually gonna take a look at that myself because I haven't watched that one. Is it better to do a rolling log or analyze 1-hour chunks?
It's better to analyze 24-hour blocks of time. So like I said, what I would recommend is collect data from like midnight to midnight. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can go through and you can have RITA import that data. You can do any post-processing you want to do on it after that. When you come in first thing in the morning at like 11, noon time, it's all set to go for you. Now, I'd be ready before that, but we're security people. We don't start till late in the day. But then it's there to go through. You threat hunt the previous day, and now you can go off to other tasks once you're done with that.
Awesome. There was someone asking if you tried integrating this with Elastic. Is that something you've looked into?
Yes. So we actually started on Elastic before we went to Mongo, and we destroyed it. You're talking about millions of connections a day, especially when you start getting into sites that might have 2 gigabit, 40 gigabit connections to the internet. It just does not scale enough for that. So we actually went through and said, okay, we want to make sure that this will scale and this will run in a decent amount of time. That's what drove us towards Mongo.
Gotcha. And some people are also asking if the logs that you're using for the demo are available to download.
The logs, no, but just go ahead and run RITA, and you'll generate similar logs. So just go through and run this the way you've seen me do it. Just follow what's in the slides, and that'll take care of it for you.
Okay, gotcha. And I think we got a few other questions. Can this also work with Solar?
Work with what?
Solar, SOLR.
I am not familiar with that tool.
Yeah, me either. I'm not exactly sure what that is, so I'm gonna skip that one for now. Sorry about that. Well, I guess if we find out what it was, if we don't know what it is, I'm assuming it does not work. It does not work.
I mean, we might get lucky, but yeah, probably not.
Yeah. if you lose, okay, yeah, if you lost audio, refresh browser. By the way, people, if you getting connection issues, refresh the browser. And I think
Agreed.
that's it for Apache Solar. It's Apache Solar. I've heard of that. I just don't know what it does, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the tool at all. So RITA will take Zeek log files. It will also read NetFlow 9, but you don't get as much fidelity out of NetFlow 9. And that's an issue with the protocol. NetFlow 9 is really kind of a hack in a lot of ways. It's great if I have a 10 gigabit connection to the internet and I have zero visibility, NetFlow is better than nothing. If I'm a .edu where everybody on my network has some expectation of privacy and I can never, ever, 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 ever look at a payload, NetFlow 9 is better than nothing. But for the rest of us, you're better off running Zeek. But RITA will take data from either one of those.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you want more questions, because we got a few more, or do you want to?
Yeah, if you got more, I'll take them. Otherwise, I'm going to show some folks a little hack on this.
Okay. One more question then. How would you use RITA, Zeek, NSM in a university network whereby there is no good baseline, i.e. scripts running that seem like a beacon?
So that's part of this process is that, so I mentioned, which one was it? This one here, I looked at it and I said, yeah, I think that's Microsoft. And it might be. We'd have to go in and we need to do some research on that. So part of this is anything that looks suspicious, you need to run it to ground. And actually, dude, this is an awesome question because it leads into exactly what I'm going to talk about here. So imagine we ran this today. We ran this yesterday. This was the data that came up. And we ran this IP address I have highlighted to ground and said, yeah, it's Microsoft. This is something normal, or it's a thermal sensor in our manufacturing environment talking to a centralized controller. There's some business need we can look at and say, yeah, this looks suspicious, but it's actually okay. There's a business need for having this take place. Now that we've figured that out today, we don't want to have to figure it out again tomorrow, right? So let me run you through the little extra hack I'm going to add in here, and we'll figure out how to make this available to everybody. So this address here, 52.179.224.121, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking that might be Microsoft. Let's take one more in here too. So let's say this 208.67.2020 is something that's also a false positive. There's some business need behind it. Now let me go back and look at the Lab 1 data real quick, just to see if those show up in here too. And of course, I don't see either one of those. All right. Oh, no, wait. 52.179.224.121. Here it is too. So this shows up in my Lab 1 data as well as being a potential false positive. I don't see the 208 in the first couple of entries, but that's okay. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Let me clear the screen, make this a little bit easier to read. We're going to go back and look at the Lab 2 output. So like I said, this 52 address, let's say we ran it down, there's a business need. This 208, if we ran it down, there's a business need. So now I want to make sure that from now on going forward, I never have that show up in my results so that I end up running it down again only to find out yet again, it's okay, there's a business need for that. There's an easy way to fix this. I can use greps-v command to go through and actually remove any entries from this output I don't want to say. So the first thing I need to do is I need to create a text file that has all of these IP addresses in it. So I'm only creating the 2 here. So I just created a file called exclude.txt, and the only thing in that file is these 2 IP addresses. Making sense? So again, you just saw me go in and use the cat command to go through and do this. You can use VI. You can use whatever tool that you want to. Anything will work fine for this. The goal is to create a file named exclude.txt, and 1 line per each IP address you want to start excluding from the output. Now what I do is I'm going to run RITA. I'm going to say show beacons again. And this was Lab 2 that we were working with. In the past, I was just saying, yeah, show that output, or run it through head, and that was it. This time, I'm going to run it through grep. So if you're not familiar with grep, it's a default tool. It just allows me to go looking for patterns within files. I'm going to say -v. -v says grab everything but. So what we're going to do, just to kind of explain how this is going to work, is I'm going to say, show me everything but any lines that have this IP address. Show me everything but any lines with this IP address here. So what I should end up with is this output minus those 2 lines we just ran to ground. And oh, by the way, this not only works for RITA, you could do a similar hack for anything else that has a bunch of IP addresses in it and you're trying to filter stuff out. -v says match it as whole words. Then I'm going to say I want to load this exclude file. Okay, so up here, the 52 address showed up, the 208 address showed up. We added those to our exclude files. Now what I'm going to try and do is produce that same output, but without those 2 lines showing up. And now if I go down and look, my 52 address is gone. This is a different 52 address. That does not match this one. And my 208 address is gone. I have another one that's close to it, but that's not it. Now I could go back into my exclude file. Let's say I figure out, yeah, this one's okay too. I can go back into my exclude file. I'll use VI for it this time. Let's see, that was 222. So let's say I'm doing another thread hunt the next day, and now I figured out that 208 address was okay as well. Now when I go through and run my next one, both of them are gone. I've got this one here. Wait a minute, that's the one I just thought I went in and pulled out. Did I get something wrong on that address? 20867. Ah, that's what I did wrong. I changed the wrong address. See, this is why we do this stuff live, so you get to see we even screw things up. Now when I do it, let me get a little space here. This is the data doesn't run together. And now you can see, yep, that address is now gone too. So, so again, I'm using the contents of that exclude file to say I know these IP addresses are okay. If they show up in any of my reports, don't show them anymore. And now, boom, they're gone from that output in there as well. So, got done with the slides a little faster than I thought, but gave you another hack you can work with to kind of clean things up. So hopefully that'll help as well. Any questions at this point?
Yes. So the first question would be, can you process live Zeek con.logs from the current directory where the profile is currently not archived?
So you can't process Zeek information in real time because Zeek actually keeps all of that in memory and then goes through and starts writing out its, and then it'll dump that to a log file once per hour. So you could using that running database command I talked about, do this every hour if you wanted to. I'm not sure it would actually be worth your while unless, again, this is your only job. If this is your only job, sure, go for it. Use the -- rolling switch. Every hour you can go in and do a new hunt to see if there's anything new and interesting in there worth paying attention to. But for the rest of us that have other responsibilities, let it collect 24 hours worth of data. Do the hunt once a day. If you're hunting once a day, oh my God, you're doing so much better than most of the environments that are out there.
Gotcha. There was another question. It looks like Zeek Mongo install in the root partition by default. Is there any way to define an alternate storage volume for them?
As part of the install script, yeah, you could probably go in and just hack the install script. There's got to be a place where we're going in and we're running the Mongo install. You could just go in and change that to say, because I'm sure Mongo has a, no, I want you to put my files in this directory instead. you could just go in and override that setting. But you need to go in and hack the install script to do it.
Okay. And can RITA output to JSON?
It does not, no. RITA only outputs to comma delimited, but there are tools out there. Yeah, so now that I've gone through and I've filtered out the stuff that I don't care about, I could actually run this through another tool and parse that out to JSON instead.
Gotcha. I think this one, okay. Is there any benefit to RITA if you intercept decrypt TLS connections?
Yes. So, let's see, do we have that in yet? No, we did not. Okay, so we've got to show user agents to look for HTTP connections. As you saw, we're pulling in the JA3 hashes. We're going to add a screen for that as well to be able to go through and find unique signatures for the way the systems are negotiating TLS sessions. So that'll be getting added in soon. But if it's encrypted and it's beaconing or it's a long connection, you don't have to decrypt that to figure that out. In fact, one of the kind of cool things about RITA is that, yeah, we can look at any of these for it. One of the things you can see is how many bytes is getting transferred on average. Actually, it's this number right here. How many bytes are getting transferred? You can actually go in and analyze that byte transfer, and if there's consistency, that helps you identify that this is my heartbeat. You can also go in and you can go back through the data, sort it through, and say, how often do I see each different session size? And that'll actually tell you, was it activated or not? And you can do that regardless of whether the channel's been encrypted or not. So for example, let's say it's going over port 8080 and it's all encrypted with TLS. Well, I may notice 20,000 sessions that transmitted, I don't know, pick a round number, 300 bytes of information. Okay, that's my heartbeat. That's the thing calling home saying, do you have anything for me to do? No, go back to sleep. I might have one session that transferred 2 megabytes of data. Well, now I know the attacker got in, activated that C2 channel. We don't get to see what they did because it's encrypted, but we know that whatever they did resulted in 2 megabytes worth of data being transferred. Well, what can you do in 2 megabytes? Well, you can't transfer a customer database, so it wasn't that. Yeah, you could look at processes in memory, the contents of the hard drive. You could look at maybe some limited output from some files. That's about it. So we can, even if it's encrypted, even if you can't see what went by, based on the session size, you can start making some pretty smart estimates about what they were actually doing in that session. So yeah, it's absolutely worth doing these checks on TLS as well.
Gotcha. And can we run RITA in a Zeek cluster configuration? I think you answered that. You answered that already, but can you do that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Just take your log files, whether they're comma separated or if they're in JSON, doesn't matter. Pull them out. You'd probably run RITA on a dedicated system by itself at that point and just let it do its thing.
Gotcha. Have you done any work pulling results into Jupyter notebooks where you can easily run some visualizations and otherwise process the results?
Yeah, we have not. But if anybody wants to go through and do that, go for it. If there's any scripting or anything needed behind it, please add that into RITA. It is open source. It does kind of live and die on community support.
Awesome. And I think DT had another question about RITA import into Elastic. We already answered that, and the answer was it kills Elastic. So I think the bottom line is don't use Elastic with RITA.
Right. Yeah, it's let's see. Do I have cap in? No. I was just kind of curious what I had for captures in there. So when you're talking about an internet link, let's say we're looking at like a 1 gigabit link. So a 1 gigabit link is 1 gigabyte worth of data per second. Your average size of a packet is about a K. So you're talking millions and millions of sessions to keep track of on a daily basis. Millions, that means if I'm trying to use Elastic, I'm creating millions of entries in it. And then I'm going to try and sort it. And then I'm going to try and process the data through it. And what we found was you don't make it anywhere near a gig. We were actually throwing some really decent hardware at Elastic, just trying to process like 200-300 megabit connections. And it was just rolling over and playing dead. So can you do this in Elastic? You can try. If you have a slow connection to the internet, it might work fine. But we went to Mongo simply for performance reasons. It's the only thing we haven't killed because of the amount of data we're actually trying to process.
Makes sense. And I think last question here is, would I need to hack the install script to install RITA standalone on another system for Zeek, from Zeek?
You don't have to hack the install script. What you can do is, if you go back to that, if you go back to the GitHub repository, it documents these are the command line switches to use if you don't want to install Zeek and if you don't want to install Mongo. So just run the install with one or both of those switches, whatever things you don't want to include as part of the install process, and it'll just go through, install RITA, and that's it, and you'll be fine.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I see Doc44 said cap infos is a Wireshark command. You're absolutely right, dude. I just wasn't sure if I had T-Shark on here or not.
Awesome. I think that's it for the questions right now. We're 2 minutes from closing time, so I think this is a good place
Cool.
to cut it.
Actually, before you do, so I see a comment, shipping logs from a Pi with a physical tap to RITA. Yeah, we actually did a webcast, I'm going to guess about 6 months ago now. If you go up to the Active Countermeasures website, go under Education, go under Webcasts, you'll find it there. It's called something like Creating a Network Monitoring Tool with a Raspberry Pi, or some name along those lines. We actually covered exactly what you're talking about, Journeyman. So yeah, can you do that? Absolutely you can. You can go through and get that running, no problem. We've had problems getting RITA running on a Pi because Mongo wants a 64-bit environment and the Raspberry Pi is 32-bit. So Zeek will install. RITA has trouble because of Mongo.
Awesome. Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that's it.